The X-Files.
Yes. So many of you reached out and said you wanted to know more about this episode, Lazarus.
Episode 15 of the first season.
From way back in 1994, February 4th to be exact.
Written by Alex Gansa and Howard Gordon. Directed by David Nutter, Lazarus.
Now it's a monster of the week, right?
It is a monster of the week, so not so much tied into the greater mythology of the show.
But it is a good one.
It is a good one.
Really unsettling in a way that some of the Alien episodes aren't.
Right.
It's just so much more, grounded in a way.
Yeah, and I think it plays with our expectations a little bit too, right? I mean, you've got Scully assisting this former FBI colleague, Jack Willis.
Who she also happened to date.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they were romantically involved back when he was her instructor at the academy.
Which just adds this whole other layer to it, you know? Because you have this case involving these bank robbers, Warren Dupree and Lula Phillips.
Based on an anonymous tip, right? So they're staking out this bank waiting for Dupree to show up.
And of course, everything goes sideways.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense scene, right? Dupree shows up, shoots Willis with a shotgun, and then Scully shoots and kills Dupree. But here's the thing.
Yeah, there's always but with the X-Files.
As they're trying to revive Willis with a defibrillator.
You know those paddles they put on your chest?
Yeah, you see Dupree's body twitch almost imperceptibly, as if reacting to the jolts meant for Willis.
It's so subtle.
Right. Did you see that?
Yeah, exactly. But it's just enough to make you think,
something's not right here.
Definitely not right. And then Willis wakes up in the hospital a few days later, but he's
different. Changed, yeah. And not in a good way. I mean, the first thing he does is cut off Dupree's fingers to take his wedding ring before escaping from the hospital.
That's brutal. I mean, talk about a red flag.
It's horrifying. And, it really underscores the fact that this is not the Jack Willis that Scully knew.
And that connection they had, right? That just makes it so much more disturbing for her.
Absolutely, because she's not just dealing with a case. She's dealing with the potential transformation of someone she was close to.
So then there's this clue that emerges that's small but significant.
The left-handed shears?
Yeah, they were used to remove Dupree's fingers, but Willis was right-handed.
Which immediately piques Mulder's interest, of course.
Of course, right. It's like a little breadcrumb trail leading him down the path of the weird.
Yeah. So they go and consult with this Dr. Varnes at the University of Maryland.
Like you do. And he offers up this theory about near-death experiences and how they can cause these massive releases of bioelectric energy.
Which could potentially lead to personality changes.
It's like they're trying to find a scientific explanation for something that feels so
supernatural.
Exactly.
But then the changes in Willis become even more obvious.
When Dupree's tattoo starts to appear on Willis's arm.
Right, like a physical manifestation of the consciousness transfer.
Which is just creepy.
Totally creepy, but, Scully's still holding on to the possibility of a more rational explanation.
Yeah, bless her heart. She's trying to stay grounded.
But then Willis, or I guess we should say Dupree, in Willis's body, confronts and kills Lula's brother, Tommy Phillips.
Because he thinks Tommy was the one who tipped off the FBI.
Yeah, another brutal act that shows just how far gone this Willis is.
And meanwhile, Scully's running tests on him.
Trying to figure out what's going on.
But Mulder, he's got this trick up his sleeve.
The birthday card.
Right. He gives Willis this fake birthday card for Scully, even though her birthday's months away, and gets him to sign it.
And Willis signs it with his left hand.
Boom. Proof. At least for Mulder.
Right. For Mulder, it's the confirmation he needed, but Scully's still hesitant.
Understandably so. I mean, it's a lot to process.
Then they get this tip from Lula Phillips's landlord.
Which leads them right to her.
And this is where it gets really intense, because Willis takes Scully hostage.
Turns on her completely, even convinces Lula that he's actually Dupree.
It's a pretty devastating betrayal for Scully.
Yeah.
Especially given their history.
Definitely. And then Willis Dupree calls Mulder demanding a ransom for Scully.
Classic hostage situation. But there's this small detail that Scully picks up on.
He's drinking tons of soda.
Which seems insignificant. But then Scully reveals that the real Jack Willis was diabetic.
And needed insulin.
So if this is really Dupree in Willis's body, he wouldn't know about that.
Which means he's in trouble.
Big trouble.
So they rob a pharmacy to get insulin, but Lula, by this point, she's not having it.
She's figured out that Dupree is somehow in Willis's body, and she refuses to let him use the insulin.
And she admits that she was the one who tipped off the FBI in the first place.
Wow, talk about a double cross.
Right. So she calls the FBI, demands $1 million for Scully.
But the FBI, they're clever.
They use this audio filtering trick to pick up the sound of a nearby airplane taking off.
Which helps them narrow down their search.
And then a cop spots the house during a door-to-door search.
Leading to the final confrontation.
Which is a nail-biter, let me tell you.
Willis Dupree pretends to be dead, but when Lula drops her wedding ring onto his body,
he grabs her gun and shoots her.
But then moments later, he dies himself because of the lack of insulin.
Like his body just couldn't overcome the need for it.
It's a tragic ending all around.
Yeah.
And in the final scene, we see Scully collecting Willis's belongings from the morgue,
Including a watch she gave him.
which had stopped at the exact time he was shot.
Just a really sad and powerful reminder of the man she lost.
It really is, but you know, the story of Lazarus doesn't end there.
Oh no, there's always more, isn't there?
Always more, especially when you get into the behind-the-scenes stuff.
The secrets and the little details that people might not know.
Like, for instance, Lazarus was actually the very first episode of The X-Files to explore the concept of consciousness transfer or body swapping.
Which became a bit of a recurring theme later on.
Yeah, it was like they planted this seed and it grew into something bigger.
And you know, it's really interesting. The writers got the idea from real-life accounts of near-death experiences.
People who had been clinically dead and then
You
revived.
came back feeling different.
Like something fundamental had shifted in their personalities.
Which just adds this extra layer of creepiness to the episode.
Right, because it makes you wonder if it could actually be possible.
And of course, we can't forget about the personal connection between Scully and Willis.
Yeah, that really adds to the emotional weight of the episode and makes her initial skepticism all the more understandable.
And it's worth noting that Lazarus was one of the first times that Scully was the one taken hostage rather than Mulder.
Yeah, it kind of flipped the script on their usual dynamic.
And even the title Lazarus is significant.
It's a biblical reference to the story of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus.
Which ties directly into the idea of Willis coming back to life with someone else's consciousness.
And you have to give credit to Christopher Allport, the actor who played Willis,
He had to portray two distinct personalities in the same body.
which is a pretty impressive feat of acting.
Definitely. And you know what else? For an X-Files episode, Lazarus is pretty unique because it doesn't really rely on traditional supernatural or alien elements.
Yeah, it's more of a psychological thriller.
Which makes it stand out.
And some fans have even interpreted it as foreshadowing Scully's later struggles with identity and control.
Oh, that's interesting. Like a subtle hint at what's to come.
Right, and on a more practical note, Lazarus was actually a relatively low-budget episode.
But it's still so effective.
It just shows that you don't always need big flashy effects to tell a good story.
And speaking of behind-the-scenes stuff, did you know that the original plan was for Dupree's consciousness to jump into Mulder's body?
Can you imagine?
That would have been wild. But the network and studio weren't keen on the idea of either Mulder or Scully experiencing something so overtly paranormal at that point in the series.
So they changed it to focus on Scully's ex-boyfriend instead.
Which, looking back, was probably a good call.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It really allowed them to explore Scully's character in a more meaningful way.
But interestingly, the network eventually became more open to the idea of Mulder having a similar experience.
Yeah, like in the Dreamland two-parter in season 6.
So they eventually came around.
They did, and here's another fun fact for you. The opening bank robbery scene was filmed on location in Vancouver.
And the actor playing Dupree was so convincing that some people actually thought it was a real robbery.
Talk about method acting.
Seriously, and the basement scenes were filmed in this asbestos-lined apartment building.
Which had mostly Asian tenants, so they had to have a translator on set.
Just a little glimpse into the logistics of filmmaking.
Right, and for those who like to keep track of these things, Lazarus was actually the first time that Scully was abducted.
Which became another recurring theme throughout the series.
Yes, it did. And we also get the reveal of Scully's birthday in this episode.
February 23rd.
Although her birth year wouldn't be established until later.
So a little bit of trivia for the diehard fans.
Now, in terms of the episode's reception, Chris Carter, the creator of The X-Files, was quite positive about it.
He said it was very good and well acted, and that it felt too real.
Which I think is a compliment in this case.
Definitely, but the critical response was a bit more mixed.
Entertainment Weekly gave it a C+, saying it was as exciting as Scully's taste in men. Not very.
Ouch!
But they did praise the supporting cast.
Zach Handlin from the AV Club gave it a beb, but felt it lacked real thematic resonance.
And Matt Hay from Den of Geek wasn't a fan, comparing it to Diagnosis Murder.
Not exactly a glowing endorsement.
And Anna Johns from TV Squad said the only good part was the opening bank robbery scene.
So it seems like people had pretty strong opinions one way or the other.
They did, but David Nutter, the director, emphasized that the pacing was key to the episode.
And that it was a pretty basic, straightforward story.
Which is interesting, considering all the twists and turns.
And just to wrap things up, writer Howard Gordon later said that while they initially wanted Mulder to experience the soul switch,
They ultimately realized that focusing on Scully's former boyfriend was a better choice.
it allowed them to delve into her history and develop her character more fully.
Which is something they might not have been able to do otherwise.
So even though it wasn't the original plan, it worked out for the best.
It seems that way.
So yeah, Lazarus, it's a creepy episode,
It really is.
but it's also really thought-provoking.
It makes you question what it means to be a person.
And what defines our identity.
Is it all just biology, or is there something more?
Something that could potentially be transferred from one person to another.
That's a pretty scary thought.
It is, and it's
Yeah.
one that stays with you long after the episode ends.
It does make you wonder.
It definitely does.
Hmm.
Well, that's our deep dive on Lazarus.
It was a good one.
It was. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
Keep on diving
Yeah.
into the stuff that matters.
Absolutely.